The sky was on fire. Flames rose high above the village of Black Hollow, turning the night into an eerie shade of red. Screams echoed through the streets as people ran for their lives, their faces twisted with terror. Edric Thorne gripped his father's arm, his heart pounding. What's happening? His father's eyes were wild. She's here. Before Edric could ask who, the wind howled, carrying a voice so cold it sent a shiver down his spine. You cannot run from me. A shadow moved through the smoke, a tall figure in a flowing black cloak. Her silver hair whipped in the wind, and her eyes, dark as midnight, locked onto Edric. Morgana Blackthorn, the most feared witch in the world. She lifted a hand and the ground beneath them cracked open. Dark tendrils of magic slithered out like living snakes, twisting toward them. Run! His father shouted, pushing him back. Edric stumbled, but before he could turn, the tendrils wrapped around his father, dragging him toward Morgana. No! Edric lunged forward, but a powerful force knocked him off his feet. He hit the ground hard, the breath stolen from his lungs. Through blurry eyes, he saw Morgana lean in close to his father. You thought you could hide him from me? She whispered. Edric's blood turned to ice. She was looking for him. His father clenched his jaw. You'll never have him. Morgana smiled, a slow, knowing smile. We shall see. Then with a flick of her wrist, she sent a wave of dark fire crashing down on him. The last thing Edric saw was his father consumed in flames. And then everything went black. Pain. That was the first thing Edric felt when he woke up. His body ached, his clothes were torn, and the smell of burnt wood filled the air. The village was gone. Only ashes remained. A deep voice broke the silence. You're lucky to be alive. Edric turned his head. A man stood over him, a tall, scarred warrior with a long coat and a silver sword strapped to his back. Who are you? Edric croaked. The man crouched beside him. Name's Alden. I hunt monsters. His sharp blue eyes studied Edric. And right now, you're the only thing standing between Morgana and destruction. Edric struggled to sit up. She killed my father. Alden nodded. And she won't stop until she finds you. That means you need to come with me. Edric clenched his fists. He was just a farm boy. He had never held a real sword, never fought a battle. But he knew one thing. He wanted Morgana dead. He met Alden's gaze. Teach me how to kill her. Alden smirked. Good, because you don't have a choice. Edric's legs burned as he struggled to keep up with Alden. The older man moved fast, weaving through the dense forest with the ease of a seasoned hunter. The further they got from the ruined village, the heavier the weight in Edric's chest became. His father was gone, his home was gone, and now he was running for his life. How do you know Morgana wants me? Edric panted, gripping a low-hanging branch to steady himself. Alden didn't slow down. Because you're the seventh son of a seventh son. Edric frowned. So what? Alden stopped so suddenly that Edric nearly crashed into him. The hunter turned, his expression hard as steel. It means you're the only one who can kill her. Edric's breath caught. He had heard whispers of such things before, stories told around the fire, legends of men born with strange abilities, chosen by fate to battle the forces of darkness. But he was just a farm boy. He didn't feel special. How? He asked. How do I stop her? Alden's eyes flickered to the sword at his hip. First, you need a weapon. He reached into his coat and pulled out a long bundle wrapped in dark cloth. Slowly, he unraveled it, revealing a gleaming silver blade. The hilt was etched with ancient runes, and the edge of the blade shimmered faintly in the moonlight. This, Alden said, is God's bane, forged to slay creatures of darkness. Aim! He held it out. Edric hesitated before gripping the hilt. The moment his fingers touched it, a strange sensation shot up his arm, like the sword was alive. It felt right. Alden watched him carefully. You felt it, didn't you? Edric nodded. What is this? A weapon made for you. Alden said. The last apprentice who wielded it died trying to kill Morgana. Now it's yours. Edric swallowed hard. He had never killed anything bigger than a rabbit, and now he was supposed to take down the most powerful witch in existence. Alden placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. This isn't just about revenge, boy. Morgana's magic is growing stronger. If we don't stop her soon, she'll tear the world apart. Edric looked down at the sword in his hands. His father had died to protect him. Now he had to make sure that sacrifice meant something. He tightened his grip. Then let's kill her. Alden smirked. That's the spirit. And with that, they disappeared into the night. 2 days later, they reached the edge of the Shadowlands, a cursed place where no light ever seemed to reach. The air was thick with fog, and the twisted trees loomed like silent watchers. Edric's fingers twitched on the hilt of Godsbane. Something was wrong. He could feel it. Alden raised a hand. Stay sharp. We're not alone. A rustling came from the trees. Edric turned, his heart pounding. Then he saw her. A girl standing in the mist. Her long black hair was braided over her shoulder, and she wore a dark cloak lined with silver thread. Her pale skin seemed to glow in the dim light, and her sharp green eyes locked onto his. She was the most beautiful girl Edric had ever seen. But she was also the most dangerous. Alden's voice was low and tense. Witch. Edric's heart stammered. The girl took a step forward. I'm not here to fight, she said. Her voice was calm, but there was something unreadable in her gaze. Alden drew his sword. Then why are you here? The girl hesitated before speaking. Because I know how to stop Morgana. Edric's grip on Godsbane tightened. He should run her through right now. Witches were liars, tricksters. He knew that. But something in her eyes made him pause. Alden wasn't convinced. And why should we trust you? The girl lifted her chin. Because I'm her daughter. The world seemed to freeze. Edric felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. Morgana's daughter? Alden's jaw clenched. Lies. The girl didn't flinch. You know it's true. She turned her gaze to Edric. And if you want to kill my mother, you'll need me. Edric's breath came fast. This was a trick. It had to be a trick. But deep down, he knew the truth. She was telling the truth. And now he had a choice to make. Trust her. Kill her. Silence stretched between them. Edric's grip on Godsbane tightened as he stared at the girl. His mind screamed at him. This was a trap. It had to be. But her eyes, they held something he didn't expect. Fear. Alden was the first to break the silence. He stepped closer, his sword raised. Give me one good reason why I shouldn't cut you down where you stand. The girl didn't move. Because I can lead you to Morgana. Alden scoffed. And why would you betray your mother? She hesitated. Then with a deep breath, she said, because if you don't stop her, she will destroy everything. Edric's pulse pounded. You're saying Morgana has more power than we thought? The girl nodded. She's preparing a ritual, a spell to shatter the veil between the living and the dead. If she succeeds, the world will be swallowed by darkness. Alden cursed under his breath. And you expect us to believe that you want to stop her? The girl's expression darkened. You think I chose to be her daughter? You think I asked to be raised by a monster? Her voice trembled, but she steadied herself. I hate what she's done. I hate what she's become, and I will stop her. Edric studied her. There was pain in her voice, maybe even regret. What's your name? He asked. The girl hesitated, then spoke. Celine. Edric took a slow breath. If you're lying, I'll kill you myself. Celine met his gaze. Then you'd better keep that sword close. Alden sighed. This is a bad idea. It's the only idea we've got, Edric said. Then he turned to Celine. Show us the way. Celine gave a small nod, then turned and walked into the fog. Edric and Alden exchanged a glance before following her into the shadows. They traveled for days, moving through forgotten roads and hidden paths. Celine knew every shortcut, every secret passage. Edric could tell Alden didn't trust her. He barely slept, always keeping one eye on her. But Edric was starting to believe her. One night, as they sat by a dying fire, he found himself watching her. She was sharpening a dagger, her hands steady, her expression unreadable. "You don't look like a witch," he said. Celine glanced up. "And you don't look like a hero." Edric smirked. "I'm not." She studied him for a moment. "Then why are you doing this?" Edric hesitated. "Because Morgana took everything from me, and I won't let her take anything else." Celine's eyes flickered with something. Understanding, maybe. Then she looked back at her dagger. "Good, because if we fail, there won't be anything left to save." The next morning, they reached the ruins of Blackwood Keep, Morgana's fortress. The once great castle was now little more than crumbling stone and creeping vines. But even in its decay, it radiated power. Dark magic twisted through the air like an unseen storm. Alden gripped his sword. "She's here." Celine nodded. "And she knows we are too." The ground trembled as they stepped into the fortress. Shadows twisted along the walls, moving like living things. Morgana's presence was everywhere. And then she appeared. She stood atop a broken staircase, her dark cloak billowing behind her. Her silver hair shimmered like moonlight, and her black eyes burned with power. "My daughter," she purred, her voice silk and poison. "You brought them right to me." Celine stiffened. "I'm not your daughter." Morgana sighed. Such a disappointment. She turned her gaze to Edric. "And you, the last son." Edric raised Godsbane. "Your reign ends tonight." Morgana laughed. "You think a boy can defeat me?" She lifted her hand and the shadows erupted. Dark tendrils lashed out, slamming into Alden and throwing him against the wall. Celine barely dodged in time, rolling to the side. Edric charged. He swung Godsbane with all his strength, aiming straight for Morgana's heart. But before the blade could touch her, she vanished. Edric froze. "Where did she—" A wicked laugh echoed through the fortress. From the shadows, figures emerged. Dozens of them. Witches, cloaked in black, their hands crackling with dark energy. Their eyes gleamed with malice. Alden groaned. Of course she wouldn't fight her own battle. Celine's face darkened. "She's gone to the mountains." Edric frowned. "Why?" Celine's voice was grim. "The full moon. She needs it to complete her ritual." Alden cursed. "Then we don't have time for this." One of the witches raised her hands, and a surge of dark fire erupted toward them. Edric barely dodged in time, rolling across the stone floor. He slashed out with Godsbane, cutting through the nearest witch. She screamed and dissolved into smoke. Celine spun, chanting a counterspell. A wall of ice shot up, blocking another attack. Edric gritted his teeth. "We need to get to the mountains, now," Alden growled, slicing through another witch. "Then let's finish this fast." The battle raged. Smoke and fire filled the air. Edric fought like a man possessed, cutting through the witches one by one. But there were too many. Celine grabbed his arm. "There's no end to them. We have to go." Edric hesitated. He hated running. But Celine was right. If Morgana completed the ritual, the world would be lost. With one final strike, he cleared a path. "Go! Now!" They sprinted out of the fortress, leaving the witches behind. As they ran, Edric looked toward the mountains in the distance. Morgana was waiting. And the final battle was about to begin. The journey to the mountains was anything but easy. The air grew colder, the land more treacherous. The sky hung heavy with storm clouds, as if the world itself sensed the darkness ahead. Morgana wasn't going to let them reach her without a fight. She was already ahead of them, preparing. And worse, she had gone to the village. They found the first signs of her cruelty near the river that marked the valley's entrance. Bodies. Villagers lay lifeless on the ground, their faces twisted in terror. Not all were dead. Some had simply vanished. Alden clenched his fists. "She took them, didn't she?" Celine's face was pale. She needs them for the ritual. The children, the virgins. She'll use their blood to open the gate of shadows. Edric gritted his teeth. Then we don't have time to waste. But Morgana had other plans. The wind howled as they pressed forward. The closer they got to the mountains, the more the land fought against them. The trees whispered, their twisted branches reaching like skeletal fingers. Shadows moved in the corner of their eyes, and then, monsters. Creatures of nightmare burst from the darkness. Wolves with glowing red eyes, their bodies unnaturally large. Spectral beings hovered in the mist, whispering curses that made their limbs heavy. A shadow beast lunged at Celine, but she reacted fast, slicing through the air with a spell. The creature screeched and dissolved into black mist. Alden swung his axe at another beast, cutting through its thick hide. She's throwing everything she has at us. Edric struck down a wolf with Godsbane, breathing hard. She's afraid. She knows we're coming for her. The storm worsened. The path narrowed. At one point, they had to climb a jagged cliff, the wind threatening to throw them into the abyss below. By the time they reached the mountain's base, they were exhausted, but there was no time to rest. Because in the distance, deep in the mountain's heart, a dark glow lit up the sky. The ritual had begun. Edric tightened his grip on his sword. We're running out of time. Celine swallowed hard. Then we stop her. Now! And with that, they began their final ascent. The climb up the mountain was brutal. The wind howled like a dying beast, carrying Morgana's dark magic through the air. Every step felt heavier, as if the mountain itself was trying to keep them away. Then came the whispers. Soft at first, then louder. Edric clenched his jaw. The voices were calling his name. Edric, turn back. You will fail. He shook his head, gripping Godsbane tighter. Ignore it. Keep moving. But Celine suddenly stopped, her breath hitching. Her eyes widened in horror. No! No, it can't be! Edric turned and followed her gaze. His blood ran cold. Standing in the mist was a man, tall, strong, with the same eyes as Celine. Father, she whispered. But Alden grabbed her arm. That's not your father, girl. The figure smirked, his voice cruel. Come to me, Celine. Celine took a shaky step forward before Edric yanked her back. It's a trick. The figure's smile twisted. Then his body melted into shadow, reforming into something monstrous. A creature with elongated limbs, jagged teeth, and hollow, soulless eyes. It lunged. Edric barely had time to raise his sword. The force of the attack sent him skidding backward. Alden swung his axe, cutting into the creature's side, but it didn't slow down. Celine's hands shook as she chanted a spell. A burst of blue fire shot from her palms, slamming into the beast. It shrieked and staggered back, its form twisting violently. Then with one final screech, it exploded into black mist. Celine was breathing hard, her eyes glassy. She's in my head, she whispered. Edric placed a firm hand on her shoulder. Don't let her break you. She's afraid of us. That's why she's trying to stop us before we even reach her. Celine swallowed and nodded. Alden cracked his knuckles. Then let's give her something to fear. They pressed forward. The air grew thicker, filled with the scent of blood and burning herbs. Morgana's magic was growing stronger. Then, at last, they reached the summit. A massive stone altar stood in the center of the peak, surrounded by jagged rocks. Black banners fluttered in the wind. The sky above them burned red, the full moon rising, bathed in a dark glow. Standing before the altar was Morgana. She was dressed in ceremonial black robes, her silver hair wild. The kidnapped villagers knelt in a circle around her, their eyes blank, entranced by dark magic. A massive stone cauldron bubbled with thick red liquid, their blood. Morgana smiled. You're too late. She raised her hands, and the ground trembled beneath them. The ground split open beneath them, releasing thick, black smoke that reeked of death. The villagers trapped in Morgana's spell didn't flinch, their eyes empty. Morgana stepped forward. her fingers dripping with dark energy. She looked at Edric with something between amusement and disdain. You fought so hard to get here, she said, but none of it matters. The blood has been spilled. The gate is opening. She gestured to the cauldron, and the liquid inside began to glow. The full moon above pulsed, casting a red haze over the mountaintop. The air became thick with magic. Edric gritted his teeth. Not if we stop you first. Morgana laughed. You think you can stop me, boy? You don't even know the truth. Celine's fingers twitched at her sides. What truth? Morgana's black eyes gleamed. Did you never wonder why my magic is strongest in your blood, Celine? Celine's breath caught. What are you talking about? Morgana smiled slowly. You are not just my creation. You are my blood, my real daughter. Silence. Celine's body is locked in place. No, she whispered. Morgana took a step closer. Why do you think I spared you all these years? Why do you think you are more powerful than any other witch? Her smile was cruel. Because you are me. You have always belonged to me. Celine's breath quickened. Edric grabbed her arm. She's lying. But deep down he wasn't sure. He saw the way Celine trembled, the way her magic had always felt. Different. Celine clenched her fists, her eyes locked on Morgana. No, she said, her voice shaking. You're not my mother. You're a monster. Morgana's expression darkened. I was hoping you'd embrace your destiny, but if you won't stand beside me. Her hands shot forward, sending a wave of dark energy straight at them. Edric shoved Celine out of the way just in time. The force of the blast sent him skidding backward. Alden roared and charged, swinging his axe, but Morgana flicked her wrist. An invisible force slammed into him, throwing him against the rocks. Edric lunged with Godsbane, but the moment his blade met Morgana's skin, something unnatural happened. The sword stopped. It hovered just above her chest, shaking violently in his grip. His arms locked, unable to push forward. Morgana smirked. Did you think you could kill me with that relic? Then with a flick of her hand, the sword was wrenched from his grasp and flung across the battlefield. Edric barely had time to react before Morgana sent a second blast at him. He hit the ground hard, pain exploding in his ribs. Celine screamed, her hands blazing with power. A wave of ice and fire shot toward Morgana. This time the witch staggered. Celine's magic was stronger than before, fueled by rage, by desperation. Morgana hissed. There it is, the power of my blood. Celine's eyes burned with fury. I am not yours. She raised her hands and the sky cracked with lightning. A storm swirled above them, growing wild and uncontrollable. Morgana narrowed her eyes. Careful, child. That kind of magic will destroy you. Celine's voice was cold. Then I'll take you with me. She unleashed everything she had. The mountains shook, the storm roared, and Morgana for the first time looked uncertain. But the ritual was still active. The cauldron still bubbled, the blood still pulsed, and the portal, black and endless, began to open behind Morgana. And from within it, something moved. A clawed hand reached through the darkness. Something ancient. Something worse than Morgana herself. Morgana turned, her smirk fading. No, she whispered. Not yet. For the first time, she looked afraid. Edric, still gasping for breath, realized something. Morgana was powerful, but whatever she had just summoned, even she couldn't control it. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. This was a fight to stop the end of the world. The portal widened, swirling with thick, black smoke. The creature inside pushed against the veil of reality, its clawed fingers curling around the edges. The sky above burned red, the full moon glowing like an open wound. Morgana staggered backward, her confidence wavering for the first time. No, this isn't how it's supposed to happen. Edric pushed himself to his feet, his ribs aching. He followed Morgana's gaze and saw it, the massive silhouette rising from the abyss. Glowing eyes peered from the darkness, filled with hunger. A low growl rumbled from deep within the void, shaking the very mountain. Alden, still breathing heavily, spat blood onto the ground. Well, that's new. Celine, her body glowing with magic, turned toward Morgana. What have you done? Morgana's lips curled in frustration. It was meant to obey me. The creature in the portal let out a sound, a deep, guttural laugh. It was mocking her. Then it lunged. A massive claw shot out, striking Morgana with such force that she was flung across the ritual site. She hit the stone altar hard, coughing blood. Edric's breath caught. If that thing could do that to Morgana, what chance did they have? Then, as if sensing his fear, the creature turned its glowing eyes on him. Before it could attack, Celine raised both hands and sent a bolt of pure white fire toward it. The flames struck its hand, and for the first time it recoiled. Celine's eyes burned with determination. It can be hurt! Edric didn't waste a second. He sprinted toward Godsbane, still lying where Morgana had thrown it. He barely managed to grab the hilt before another clawed hand shot toward him. Oh! Alden tackled him out of the way just in time. The ground where Edric had been standing exploded under the creature's strength. We need to cut it off from the portal, Celine shouted. Edric gripped Godsbane, his chest heaving. How? Morgana, still coughing, let out a bitter laugh from where she lay. There's only one way. She struggled to her feet, her face twisted in pain. You have to use my blood. Celine's stomach clenched. Morgana wiped the blood from her lips. This creature was bound to my magic. If you want to close the portal, you need to use the source of that magic. She looked at Celine, her eyes unreadable. Me. Celine shook her head. You expect us to trust you? Morgana gave a weak smirk. I don't care if you trust me, but if that thing steps into this world, nothing will stop it. Not me, not you. Edric clenched his jaw. He didn't want to believe her, but the portal was getting wider, and the creature was getting stronger. Selena turned to him, her hands shaking. Edric, I can do it. He looked at her, heart pounding. If they let Morgana live, she would always be a threat. But if they didn't listen to her now, everything would be lost. He met Celine's gaze. Are you sure? Celine nodded, her eyes fierce. I have to be. Without hesitation, she turned and drove her dagger into Morgana's heart. Morgana gasped, her body going stiff. Then, instead of collapsing, her blood, dark and shimmering with magic, rose into the air, pulled by the portal's energy. The creature let out an ear-splitting shriek as the blood spiraled toward it, binding it. The portal wavered, its edges flickering. Celine raised her hands, pouring the last of her magic into the spell. A blinding flash erupted from the portal. The creature roared, its massive body dragged back into the abyss. Its claws scraped against the stone, fighting to hold on, but the magic was too strong. Then, with one final deafening howl, it was gone. The portal snapped shut. The mountain fell silent. Celine staggered, her strength draining fast. Edric caught her before she collapsed. Morgana's body slumped against the altar, her breathing shallow. She gave a weak, bloody smile. You are my daughter, she whispered. Then her eyes closed. And she was gone. The red glow faded from the sky. The full moon dimmed to silver. The mountain, once filled with darkness, felt still. Alden sat on a rock, exhaling loudly. I hate witches, he muttered. Edric let out a breathless laugh, holding Celine close. You okay? Celine nodded weakly. I think so. She looked at Morgana's lifeless body. Despite everything, a shadow of sadness crossed her face. It's over. Edric wasn't so sure. He looked at Godsbane, its blades stained with the battle's final moments. It's over for now. Celine met his eyes, her expression unreadable. Then we'll be ready. As the first light of dawn touched the mountain, Edric held on to that hope. No matter what came next, they had won this battle, and together they would face whatever darkness still lurked in the shadows. For more stories, please subscribe and hit the notification button.